Hi, everybody. Jennifer from Gals, Ghosts, and Ladies here. Hope everybody's doing well. If there is anybody tuned in, please say hello in comments so that I know that you can hear me. I did an audio test earlier, and I think everything seems to be working all right. So I'm going to jump into, let's say, comments and see if anybody can say anything. I do appreciate it. Welcome to Gals, Ghosts, and Ladies. This is my Saturday night live stream. I'm trying to do a live stream every Saturday night at 5:30. I'm glad that you're joining us. And if you're joining us live tonight, I really appreciate that. And if you're watching at a later time on either Facebook or YouTube, I also appreciate that as well. Thank you for your support. This is an 18 and over conversation tonight. We are definitely talking about things that might be disturbing to some viewers. And I swear a lot, so I'm not swearing tonight, So anyways, this really is a conversation for people 18 and over. So heads up to everybody. This is also a 420 friendly place, so smoke them if you got them. I know I sure will. Make yourself comfortable. I did all the research for tonight. We're going to talk about Lizzie Borden. Tonight's conversation was going to be about Lizzie Borden, but as you're going to see, it's actually become more of a focus on Fall River. Definitely the Borden family figures prominently throughout the history, not just for the murders that we all know of, but it's Fall River. So I think, what's the term of the night? Facta obscura. I think I have found some very obscure facts that some of us who thought we really knew what was going on with the Lizzie Borden case and Fall River maybe really don't. Maybe I hope to share some news with you tonight that you have never heard. And I'm sitting on a very creaky stool. I apologize for that. But anyways, as I was saying, I hope to share some information that is new to you. And if it is new to you, please definitely comment, and I will try my best to interact with the comments. I did a lot of research for tonight's program. I have 5 pages of notes, and so you will forgive me for the shuffling of papers and for referring to my notes, because there is a lot of information here that I'm going to try to disseminate in a short period of time. And I did this research myself. It was a lot of research. I did it all week long. Every day after work, I came home and worked on my notes and looking stuff up. But that being said, any research errors, if I said this before, I'm sorry for being redundant. Any research errors are mine, and I do apologize for that. Like I've said before, don't take my word for it. Look it up yourself. You get a Google finger. Look it up yourself. And if you find something conflicting, come back and let's talk about it. This is all about having a conversation. So again, I'm going to jump over to, let's see, where's comments? I don't see anything in comments. Michelle Mitchell, if you are there, let me know. Lisa Aubie, if you're there. Hi, Lisa. I'm glad to see that you're here, Lisa, because you figure prominently in tonight's live stream. If you see me looking to the side, it's because I am looking at my comments over here. And again, I apologize. I feel like Walter Cronkite with all my notes from the old days. Good evening, everybody. All the news that's fit to print. No, that wasn't Walter Cronkite. Did you get my drift? So Lisa, I hope you're well. And like I said, you will definitely figure prominently. So tonight there's a couple of shout outs that I do want to give. And I also want to kind of show off some of the things that I'm learning using StreamYard. So I've got a banner. I've got tonight's shout outs, my cousin Michelle Mitchell and my friend Lisa Aubie. So starting with my cousin Michelle Mitchell, she gets the first shout out tonight because Michelle, I did a live stream for you for the Running Man of Bristol, and I caught the bug for live streams. So I just have to thank you, Michelle. I've been doing this frequently and I absolutely love it. So thank you. And I also have to say that Michelle was my very first best friend. She's my cousin and we grew up together. So I love you, Michelle, and so excited about the news I shared with you earlier too. We talked on the phone earlier today. So that's my shout out to my cousin Michelle. And now I want to give a shout out to my friend Lisa Aubie, because back in, God, Lisa, was it 2018? Lisa Aubie and I went on a ghost hunt, an overnight ghost hunt, to the Lizzie Borden house. And it was so much fun. And I'm going to talk about that for a few minutes. But it was, anytime I hang out with Lisa, anytime we do anything together, it's a lot of laughs. It's a lot of fun. And this time was no different. It was definitely a good time. So I want to give those shout outs out. Michelle and Lisa, thank you both. And I love you both. Thank you both very much. And I hope you like my new banners. That's what those are called. Uh, let's see, what's next? Oh, and again, I am still new at live streaming, so please, I welcome anybody's critiques, but please do be kind. Thank you very much. I also welcome opposing viewpoints, but do remember that this is my live stream, and most of the opinions that you hear are mine, and I'm not interested in arguing with anybody. And this is Gals, all paranormal, never politics. Um, let's see. So I want to talk a little bit about mine and Lisa's trip. We went to Fall River, and let's see. There we go. How about that? So we went to Fall River, and to give you an idea of where Fall River, Massachusetts is, where the Lizzie Borden house is, you can see Boston at the top. Fall River is about 50 miles south. If you look at the other map, the Bridgewater Triangle, if you look all the way down in the far right corner of the triangle, you'll see Fall River. So Fall River really falls right on the very edge of the Bridgewater Triangle. I've talked a little bit about the Bridgewater Triangle before, and I'm going to talk about it more as time goes on. So I thought that was interesting that it's on, like, just on the edge of that. But so I drove down from Boston, and Lisa drove from Connecticut, and we met at the Lizzie Borden house. And funny story, when I was driving there, so this was about 2018, and I had an old cell phone, and my let's see, comments. Hello, everybody. Oh, hi, everybody. Michelle and Crystal and Joan. So anyway, so I was driving to Fall River from Boston to meet Lisa, and about 2018, I had an old cell phone, and the GPS was not great. So this was back in the day before I wore glasses all the time. I did wear readers, but you can't really wear reading glasses when you're driving, right? So since I didn't have a GPS on my phone, and I didn't have a printer for MapQuest, because whoever has a printer that works. Hi, Alex. But whoever has a printer that works. So I wrote the instructions down on white copy paper in a big black Sharpie, so that as I was driving, I could see the directions to Fall River on the paper without glasses and see where I was going. Well, I did really, really well until I get to the heart of Fall River. And as the old Bugs Bunny expression goes, I took a wrong left turn at Albuquerque. I ended up someplace I had no business ending up. I ended up on the biggest effing bridge I've ever seen in my life. It's the bridge that, if anybody ever has that recurring bridge dream, this is that bridge that in the dream that you go over. But this bridge was massive. And I knew I was going in the wrong direction, and I was going to end up in Rhode Island. And there was no GPS lady telling me, ding, 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 reroute, and you need to do this. I said, shit. And there were signs everywhere. Oh, and not for nothing. This was 3 lanes each way, 50 miles an hour. This was a major, huge bridge. And I am in the wrong direction, headed to a different state, scared shitless. And there's and agree, Alex, Fall River is terrifying. And yes, it is. I think it is the bridge to Providence. It's a big, huge bridge. Signs everywhere that say no U-turn, no U-turn, no U-turn. And I said, I am willing to take my chances, pull me over and write a ticket. Did you do a U-turn? Yes, I did. And I did the U-turn. As my first husband would have said, I banked a Yuki, and I did a U-turn, and I just looked in my rearview mirror and waited for state police or somebody to pull me over, because I would have taken the ticket. I would have taken the ticket because I had no choice. I had to turn around, and there were no police and nobody saw me, and I got back on track. But I was white knuckling it, and I think everybody's been in that position once or twice. Shout out to Joan Sear, who knows what it's like to drive in Boston. And Alex knows that bridge. So that was the trip getting there. Once I got to Fall River, Lisa and I met at a Mexican restaurant. We had a great lunch, and Fall River is quaint. It's a little it can be a little dangerous if you're not from that area. It has a very large Portuguese immigrant population, very, very large, very cultural. I'll tell you about that in a second. So, anyways, we had a great lunch, and then we drove over to the Lizzie Borden house, and it was a little early to check in. So we went in the gift shop and did a few things like that, and then we brought our stuff in, and we still had a little bit of time before the ghost hunt. This was Memorial Day weekend. Uh, what American sporting event takes place around that? Is it the Kentucky Derby? No, that's earlier. There was some really huge American sporting event happening that weekend. And, anyways, before the ghost hunt, me and Lisa decided we would take a little walk around, and we found this quaint little bar, and we went in to have a drink before all the activities. And what there was, it was Portuguese TV on the bar, whatever it was. These people were not watching whatever this major American sporting event was. And for the life of me, off the top of my head, I can't remember it. And I'm sorry about that. But anyways, had a lovely time in this quaint little neighborhood bar, and had a nice walk back, and had a really great ghost hunt. Started out with a tour from a guy who really, really told a good story, as he was dressed in period clothing, and he really built an atmosphere and set a tone and brought you through the house and told you the story of what happened. And we're going to get to that a little later. So I'm not going to delve into that. I'm also not going to say the poem. We all know what the poem is, and the poem is wrong. So I'm just not going to say that. I get so many other things that I want to say. So the tour was great, and then this was hosted by USA Ghost Hunts, or one of those things, and it was very small, just me and Lisa, and then the guy and his daughter. He brought his daughter for her birthday, and the girl who ran the thing, and we had a lot of fun and a lot of laughs. And I want to share with you. I've got two graphics that I want to share with you. Now I have like night vision and all kinds of gadgets and stuff. Back then, we really just had our cell phones, or I think I might have had a Canon camera or something. I want to share a couple of pictures with you. So if we look at this first one, let's see if I can make this full screen. I'm learning StreamYard. So if you look at the top left picture, these are three pictures in succession. Sorry, we're starting with the bottom picture where there's really not much, the bottom left. And then if you look to the top left, there's a in the wood panel, there's a small white like dot like orb. And then if you look at the larger picture on the right, you can see two big orbs. And those three pictures were taken in succession. So those are kind of cool. That they changed, and they tell you to take pictures three in succession anyways, but you can see some changes there, and that stairway was kind of cool and kind of creepy. So there is that, and then there's this picture, and I love this picture. This picture is Emma Borden's bedroom, and in these three pictures, this is the room where the psychic who was like the hostess of the event, this is the room where she slept. Hi, Deborah Manning. Thanks for noticing my nails. But if you notice in the smaller picture, the first one, there's really no mist there. In the second picture, there's a little more mist over the bed. And in the third picture, there's a really prominent mist. I certainly didn't see that when I was taking the photographs. And it's just interesting that that's where the psychic slept, in Emma Borden's room. And that is Emma Borden. So that was some of our escapades, mine and Lisa's, at the Lizzie Borden house. It was a lot of fun, and I know I have more footage, and I spent time pouring through my laptop looking for it, and certainly couldn't find it because I was under the gun. So that was our ghost hunt escapade there, and I'm looking forward to going back. I have a thing there in a few months, and I'm really looking forward to that. But I am going to Michelle Mitchell. You're swearing. Calling you out like your mother would. But without further ado, if nobody minds, I am going to, let's see if I can pull up another banner. This is what I want to ask. What mysteries lie in Fall River, Massachusetts? Stick around if you're ready to find out. Okay, here we go. So Fall River was incorporated in 1803, but it had certainly been settled long before that. Like so many communities in the Massachusetts Bay Colony, New England, anywhere in the United States, really, where there's water, there were settlements long before Europeans came here. And again, this isn't a colonizer conversation, I'm just stating facts. So the area of Fall River was occupied for a very, very long time by what I would call First Nation people. And the Bordens actually figured quite prominently starting around the mid 1700s. I didn't go so far back to see were they English or Scottish or whatever, but their name really started popping up in the textile industry in the 1700s in Fall River. And as we said, it's about 50 miles south of Boston. So it was a very prominent textile industry and in the Bridgewater Triangle, as we said. So settled in 1803. Well, in 1831, a woman in Fall River had gone down to the Quikashan River to gather some sand to wash some pots and pans. And as she dug up the sand, she ended up unearthing this guy. And what's weird about this was she not only did she unearth a full skeleton, but I mean, it wasn't unusual. There were, again, First Nation people, bones were found in this area. There were First Nation people here for a long, long time. So that in and of itself wasn't unusual. But what was unusual is that this skeleton, if you notice, is sitting upright. Its knees are bent. Its knees were parallel to its chest. This skeleton was wearing brass breastplates and was wearing a brass belt, and he was in the presence of copper arrowheads. He's very, very interesting find compared to the other finds in the area of just bones. It could have been indigenous, or some theories say that it was Viking. And the skeleton ended up in a museum and was destroyed in a later fire. So they never could test it for DNA or use any of the modern kind of stuff that they use now, you know. So let's see, let's get back there. So that was a really interesting find, and that was in 1831. So again, there's no way to tell what that was. It really could have been anything. I think it would be interesting to find out when were brass tools like that first used, and what I don't know, nationalities or whatever used them, and you know, kind of bring it forward or backward that way. But that's another project for another day. So that was 1831. In 1832, now this was interesting. There was a woman, I want to say there was a young lady, but she was 30. And in 1832, if you were 30 and you were not married, you were a spinster or an old maid. Well, there was a spinster, an old maid named Sarah Cornell. And let's see, let's bump back to comments. And again, hello, everybody. I'm sorry I can't respond to everybody because I have so much stuff to cover. So Sarah Cornell was an old maid, and she was, I don't know, almost like a vagrant. Like she traveled, think of the girl in the House of Mirth, like that. She traveled around New England getting work at different textile factories, probably lived in rooming houses and that kind of stuff. No real roots, wasn't married, didn't have kids. And she worked in Rhode Island, New Hampshire, and finally she settled in Fall River, Massachusetts, working for a textile company there. And she was a good Methodist, and she went to church, and she got involved with her local Methodist church in Fall River. Well, on December 21st, 1832, Sarah Cornell was found hanging, and she was dead. And it looked like a suicide, and it was, bam, it was deemed a suicide. Excuse me. Well, they did an autopsy on her, And when they took all her clothes off, they had discovered that Sarah Cornell had been bruised and beaten and abused very, very badly. And they also found that the 30-year-old unmarried Sarah Cornell, unmarried in 1832, was pregnant. So, scandalous, but now that really casts some suspicion on things. What the hell happened here? How did these bruises get under all her clothing and that kind of thing? Raised a lot of questions. When her rooms, her property was searched, they found a trunk with some letters. And so she was found hanging on December 1st. They found a letter dated December 21st. Excuse me, December 20th. She was found on the 21st. The letter was dated December 20th. And the letter said, "If I should be missing, inquire of Mr. E.K. Emery. He will know where I am." So she's found dead on December 21st. On December 22nd, they found a letter dated December 20th that she had written saying, "If something happens to me, check this guy out." Well, Mr. E.K. Avery, if I said Emery, I apologize. Mr. E.K. Avery just happened to be the minister at the Methodist Church, the married minister at the Methodist Church. So that letter was pretty incriminating. So he was picked up right away and he was charged and he was tried. And at that time, the people high up and whoever was trying him were also Methodists. So a Methodist minister can't do this. So he was acquitted. And you have to know that acquitted and not guilty are two different things. But he was acquitted, and there was massive public outrage. After he was acquitted, they burned effigies of him. They chased him. They tried to lynch him. What else did they do? They held rallies against him. The public was absolutely outraged that this guy was let go, even with the scandal of the woman not being married, which during that time period they could have like looked the other way, but they didn't. So, but people were just outraged that he got away with this. And he ended up moving to Ohio and dying there, which I don't know if people knew who he was or not, but that was in Fall River, and who knew about that? That was in 1832. In 1843, on July 2nd, a couple of boys were playing with a cannon. Now, July 2nd, 1843, it was a hot and dry and windy summer, and the boys were playing with a cannon. Well, what does that tell you about the time period? In 1843, they were playing with a cannon. You know, in my age, boys were playing with matches and cigarettes. Nowadays, it's lighters. Boys will be boys. Um, Not funny, I guess, when you hear what happened. They were playing with the cannon on a hot, windy, dry summer day, and it sparked a massive blaze. And Fall River, the town of Fall River, lost its post office. It lost several churches. It lost several banks. And 200 families, 200 people, 200 families lost their homes. How many people is that? Most families, the two parents, and they certainly had two or more kids, so that's 800 people lost their homes in that fire, in that accidental fire in 1843. Now, I don't know if there were any deaths because I had a lot more research to do, but there probably were deaths. So again, there's a lot of mystery going on in Fall River, Massachusetts, if anybody never noticed this before. So yeah, so that was 1843. What do we have next? 1848, 5 years later. Let's see. Oh, let's see. I got a picture. This is weird. This is a picture of this Sarah Cornell being dragged away by the minister, just a weird with demons in the background. Just thought it was a very, very funny and strange picture. But let's see, what do I have next? So let me add this. So if you look at this picture, the house kind of right in the middle behind the tree, that's the Borden house. The house to the right, the little Cape Cod house, um, Eliza Darling Borden lived there. I think it was like a by marriage a great aunt of Andrew Borden. It was absolutely related. Um, and in 1848, she was 37 years old, and they said that she had. Nowadays, they look back and they said that she had severe postpartum depression. Um, uh, let's see where I want to be here. There we go. They said that she had severe postpartum depression. She was 37 years old, and that's kind of old back then to have had three children right in succession, but she did. And they said she had severe postpartum depression, and she ended up in that house next to where Andrew Borden ended up living. She killed two of her kids, tried to kill a third one, and it survived. And she killed herself. And bizarrely, and I'm going to be very graphic, and I remind you again, this is 18 plus because this is disturbing for some people. But after she did that to the kids, she slit her own throat. And I just have to say, I just can't even imagine what kind of gumption it would take to do something like that. Something so violent to yourself. It would take a lot of, I don't know. So she was not well. That's to say the least. And there's different stories about what she did to the kids, but it's did happen on that property in the house next to where Andrew Borden ended up living. So that was a very sad story. And then as the years went on, Andrew Borden grew up and lived in the middle house. That middle house used to be a two-family house, and when Andrew Borden moved in, he converted it to a single-family home. So in 1892, that's when Andrew and Abby Borden were murdered. Let me ask you this. Let's see. Yeah, there's a picture of the Borden family. Andrew and Abby Borden at the top, Lizzie and Emma, the two sisters. And then there's John Morrison. We're going to talk about him in a second. And there's the house. And if you look to the right of the house, there's some remnants of that Cape Cod where the great aunt a few years earlier, where that tragedy had happened. But let's talk for a second about what was it like to live with Andrew Borden? I mean, look at those beady eyes. Look at he's got less lips than I do, and I don't have any lips. But look at those beady eyes. He does not look like a happy man. Um, he looks kind of freaky, but what was it like to live with him? Well, by today's standards, they would be multimillionaires. They had a lot of money. He was a shrewd businessman. Uh, and he had a lot of business dealings, and his family, he came from generational wealth because his family was in textiles for 150 years before this even happened. But he was a multimillionaire, but they lived in extreme, and there's air quotes, extreme frugality to the point of deprivation. During the late 1800s, everybody had running water, everybody had electricity, and most people had telephones and were getting telephones. And the Borden household didn't have running water in 1892, and it didn't have electricity, and it did not have a telephone. It did have heat. It did have heat. Andrew Borden did get heat. I don't know why. But when you see like there's no electricity, like that meant like there was no refrigeration. So there were really screwy things happening in the house. Like they were eating spoiled food in the summertime, like mutton stew that had sat out on the counter because there was no refrigeration, and people were sick and under the weather and not feeling well, and it's really messed up. But to give you an idea of what I mean by deprivation, let me show you a picture. It is graphic. Again, this is an 18 and older conversation. Please, any kids should leave the room. I'm not going to show all the gory pictures, but I am going to show this one picture of Abby Borden. It is the crime scene. Um, this was the actual police photograph, but I want you to look at her shoes. Look at the size of her shoes. Abby Borden didn't have massive feet. Abby Borden had gout. And instead of buying her decent shoes for her gout, which they certainly could afford to do, he made her wear his hand-me-down shoes. His men's, most likely ill-fitting, to me it looks like they're two different sizes even, shoes. He would not buy his wife a decent pair of shoes for having gout. And that really says a lot, I think, about the extreme frugality. You buy your wife a pair of decent shoes when she's got gout. And also in that room, she was making the bed up. John Morse was a visitor, so she was on her feet working, even though they had a housekeeper in the house. So I think that says something, but understand that extreme frugality. The mutton stew that they had eaten that people had gotten sick of, they had eaten it 3 days in a row. And mutton is a really shitty cut of lamb. If anybody knows anything about lamb, I can't stand lamb, but mutton, it's chewy, it's sinewy, it's the worst cut I think that you can get of lamb. But and that's what his family was eating, and for 3 days in a row, and people were starting to get sick in the house. So that must have been what it was like to live with Andrew Borden. Let's see. What there was a lot of resentment. Lizzie really resented some things that he had done. Andrew had killed her chickens. Well, some reports said pigeons, but he killed some type of bird of hers. He could be at times very generous with her. He had bought her a trip to Europe. If she wanted a gift, he would buy her a gift. She was known to shoplift in the town, and I think, nowadays what we know about psychology, she was acting out. Being a thief doesn't make you a murderer, but she was acting out, and everybody, I guess, knew that she was stealing, but but Andrew could be very generous with her. Like I said, bought her a trip to Europe and that kind of thing. And if he showed affection or gave money to somebody else, she got very jealous. She got jealous. Andrew was giving money to the original mother. Abby was a stepmother, giving money to the original mother's family. And John Morse was a relative of the original mother. Again, we're going to talk more about John Morse. But so Lizzie had some resentments, and there's also some rumors of some unnatural things going on in that house that's just, very bizarre. So that leads us to what? To the murders. To the murders. So we do know what happened. And again, I'm not going to say the poem. It was the father was 10 or 11, hits to the skull with a hatchet, and Abby was 18, hits to the skull. Abby was facing her killer when she was killed, and Andrew was kind of laying back on the couch. I'm not going to show the picture, it's brutal. Bizarrely, they laid them out in the dining room of the house for 3 days. They also bizarrely, with these massive head injuries, they had open caskets and they just turned their heads to the other side, I guess. Very, very bizarre. So we do know that the murders took place, and we know Lizzie was home at that time, the maid was home at that time. So I just got to throw, you all know, we've all heard the same things. So the question is, guilty or not guilty? So let's see. Now that leads me to a certain page of notes, guilty or not guilty. And we've got arguments for both sides, and I would love to know what everybody thinks about this. And I'm sorry for taking a drink. I have a new cup. I'm sorry you have to hear my ice. And thank you. So guilty or not guilty? I don't know which side to begin with. So I think let's start with not guilty. Let's start with that, just to be fair and kind. There was an extreme lack of physical evidence at the site. So the crime site, the crime scenes were very, very messy, but God, whoever had done that crime would have been covered in blood in their hair and everything else. And they were going to hear about some clothing a little further on, but these people didn't have a shower. So, I mean, anybody who committed that crime, you would imagine they would just be, you imagine it just would have been very, very messy. the person in my estimation who committed that crime would have had to have been exhausted. And Lizzie Borden was there to greet the police, talk to the police, um, and was up and around and all that kind of stuff. So, and there were no witnesses. There were no witnesses to this, and it was a brutally and physical crime, very physical crime. And I don't think that she exhibited any type of what I would imagine to be kind of exhaustion and also covered in stuff. So now let's talk about guilty. There were definitely conflicting stories from Lizzie. Lizzie had said that, gee, during the time of the murders, she had gone out to the barn to look for some lead sinkers, and the barn was very dusty, and they found that the dust hadn't been disturbed. Nobody had been in that barn, not Lizzie, not anybody. So that story didn't jive. Lizzie also said that she didn't realize that Abby was home. She said that somebody had come to the door that morning with a note for Abby, calling her away to go tend to a sick friend. So Lizzie, when she said she discovered her father, she didn't realize that Abby was there. But no such note was ever found, not on Abby and not anywhere in the house. So that was a conflicting story. The fact that there was rumor of abuse or and a lot of jealousy, and it also had happened that Andrew Borden had cut Emma and Lizzie out of his will and left everything to Abby. So it would make sense that if you were one of the children and you wanted to get your hands on that money, you'd have to get rid of both of them, Andrew and Abby. So there was definitely motive. There was means, there was opportunity. Lizzie was home that morning. So that's oh, and interestingly, they found a hatchet, although it's not the murder weapon. It's not the murder weapon. I'm going to show you a picture of the hatchet. So this is the hatchet that they found on the Borden property, and the handle was broken off, and some people had speculated that the handle was broken off because it would have been covered in blood. But the reality is, on that kind of brutal crime, there would have been blood. You never would have washed all the blood off of everywhere on this part. There was no blood found on this. That's part A. And part B, the second part of that is that there was a hair found on this hatchet, and it was determined not to be human. So this hatchet with a broken handle was found at the Borden household. And I think it's actually on display in a museum, but it is not believed to be the actual hatchet or axe that was used in the crime itself. So no weapon was ever found. So I think we're showing some interesting points, guilty, not guilty. Anybody, out there in Facebook Live land know who John Douglas is, the FBI profiler? What would he say about this crime? He would say, that's kind of where my mind goes, that kind of analytical thing, the FBI profiling. Facing Abby, somebody would have been facing her and attacked her with extreme violence to her face. To me, that's overkill. That's somebody that didn't like her. That kind of lends itself towards the Lizzie theory. And it was the same thing with Andrew. It was extreme overkill. It was destruction of both of their faces. Those are really, really personal crimes. To me, they'd be crimes of passion. To whoever killed them knew them and really hated them and wanted to destroy them. That's what it seemed. But we're going to hear about something in a couple minutes that is going to things that make you go, It's going to make you go back and go, that facta obscura that I'm about to reveal to you very shortly, that is just going to blow your mind very soon. Also, a few days later, Abby, what's her name? Lizzie was seen burning a dress that she said that she had got paint on, but I think that would have been really hard to hide from the police, a dress covered in blood. So maybe it really did have paint. Other stories say that it had flea bites on it, and flea bites in the late 1800s were a euphemism for menstrual blood, for anybody who wanted to know that. So, all right, let's see. So I think again we made some good points for guilty and some good points for not guilty. Then you've got John Morse, I think he was the brother of the original mother who died many, many years ago, and he was a house guest at the Borden's house at the time of the murders. He was away from the house at the time of the murders, but what's really, really weird is his alibi. He has a solid, airtight alibi, so bizarrely to the minute, with receipts that he took a carriage somewhere and he made it a point to get to know the names of the horses, and then he was at the pharmacy and got a, I mean, it was, he had detail about his day that you wouldn't normally have about your day kind of at the ready. You'd have to stop and think about some things. So it was really bizarre how ready he was with a solid alibi. Also, I had heard there might have been some bad blood between him and Andrew. He had refused a loan from Andrew, even though he was staying there. And Lizzie was jealous that any money was going to the original mother's family, too. So again, any research errors, completely my fault. I apologize. It was long nights researching this, so there may be some date errors and fact errors, and I apologize. But again, that's the arguments, guilty, not guilty. I'm not saying one way or the other. I'm sure everybody has an opinion. For me, my mind is still open given these things. And then, just wait for it. Oh, I do want to say one more thing too. I found this was bizarre. I had never heard of this before. During the Lizzie Borden case, there was a reporter named Henry Tricky. Funny name for a reporter, Tricky. Henry Tricky, and he worked for the Boston Globe, and he was well known for printing the facts on all the crimes, and he was well known and very revered reporter. And he started printing smack about Lizzie Borden. He started printing complete falsehoods that she was pregnant, that she was having affairs, that all these other things that were flat out proven to be false. And he got in a lot of trouble for it. And the reason why I bring that up is because whether it's 1892 or 2025, and I think of like the Karen Reed case, or even something like the O.J. Simpson case, or that kind of stuff, things are tried in the public eye. What you read, what you hear. Now we've got social media. If a newspaper like if the Boston Globe, not like the Boston Globe, if the Boston Globe was publishing that stuff in 1892 without verifying their facts, shame on them, because those newspapers back then, not so much anymore, but those newspapers back then, really told the truth and really relied on verifying their facts, and he didn't. So he got away to a certain extent with publishing some really bad and negative things about Lizzie Borden, which you can print all the retractions you want. Not everybody reads the retraction that read the article. So there was definitely some damage done. So you talk about being tried in the public eye. I think that some real damage was done as far as getting a fair trial, like Karen Reed. Not saying if she's guilty or not guilty. The courts came back and said not guilty. But what I am saying is that with so much, with social media and everything that you see and hear, and you don't know where the truth is coming from, the people are tried in the public eye, and it can skew somebody's fair trial. So I just thought that was interesting to mention about that Henry Tricky, that those fake news, even back then, it is not just a 2025 problem. So now, fast forward, but not too far. So, all right. So, 1892, the Borden murders happened. In 1893 was the Lizzie Borden trial. We know she was acquitted. And again, acquitted and not guilty are not the same thing. Acquitted meant she wasn't found guilty in the court of law. And that was, her trial was in 1893. Well, also, wait for this one. This is the facta obscura that I've been telling you about. Wait for it. I'm going to drop a bombshell on you. I had no idea about this. So, in 1893, shortly after the trial of Lizzie Borden, a woman named Bertha Manchester, who was 22 years old, found somebody ransacking her home. Or I think it was like her father's home, something like that. They had some money, and they had a man who worked for them that maybe thought that he owed them some money, but he was ransacking the house, and she caught him. This is how the story goes. She caught him. He killed her, he claimed, in self-defense against a 22-year-old woman in 1893. He claimed to kill her in self-defense. How did he kill her? In self-defense. You ready for this? 20 axe blows to the head. So a year after the Borden murders, and shortly after Lizzie Borden was acquitted, and honestly, Lizzie was really the only suspect. John Morse's alibi checked out. There was another guy who was thought to maybe be an illegitimate son of Andrew Borden's, but wasn't, and thought he was trying to extort money. It wasn't him. But shortly after the Borden murders, Crystal Rose Gray, isn't it? That is crazy. Well, wait for this other facta obscura. No public correlation was made between the two murders for 80 years. I mean, I saw this and said, holy cow, these must be connected. Well, it took them 80 years to publicly make a connection. 20 axe blows as a means of self-defense because you're caught ransacking. I mean, I understand killing a witness, but again, I think of John Douglas, the FBI profiler. You are talking about a very, very up close and personal action. You are talking about the destruction of somebody's face and head. That is a very overkill thing. So there's that weird factor as well. But this is too much coincidence for my taste. This is and Crystal Rose Gray, I'm going to agree with you. There are more cases, but I could only do so much research in a week. But this one in particular really, really blew my mind. And I was so excited to share it with people because who knew? I'm 61 years old. I've always been I don't know, I don't know, Lizzie Borden, not a fan, but I don't know. I've always had an interest in the crime, and now I live in Massachusetts, and I just think that this is too much. It's too close. It's too much, and I can't believe it took 80 years for them to make any connection. I just can't believe it. So that is what we have for the mysteries of Fall River. So what do you think is happening in Fall River? Like I said, we were going to talk all things Lizzie Borden, but I think there's a bigger picture at play here. We do have a lot of tragedies running through the Borden family that go back a long time. There's also a history of occupation on that land. And whenever there's a history of occupation, wherever people live, people die. So you've got First Nation people there, and then you've got settlers there, and then even in the 1700s, because there's so much water, it's a port city, it's textiles on the water, so it was really, I don't even know what I was going to say, but anyways, that is, I have given you a lot of information. I hope I've given you some food for thought. Crystal Rose Gray, the Bridgewater Triangle is definitely on my list of things that I've started to research. I've done some ghost hunts in the Bridgewater Triangle. I find that very exciting. And I look forward to sharing some of that with you guys. So yeah, I think I gave you a lot of stuff about Lizzie Borden. Oh, that was my train of thought. So yeah, this wasn't just about Lizzie Borden. I found that Fall River being occupied for so long and having so many tragedies, that's a lot of stuff concentrated in a short amount of research. So there's definitely more, like Crystal says. And I look forward to doing more research. I wish I had more time. And at this point, I got to give a shout out to Ladybug Pest Control where I work, because without the day job, there is no night job. There is no this. So I'm very grateful for Ladybug Pest Control, my day job, so that I can have the time and the opportunity to do these live streams. So I do hope that everybody enjoyed this show about what started out as Lizzie Borden, but turned into Fall River. I also want to ask, what does everybody think of my new backdrop? It's kind of a stairway going up into a treehouse with a library. I certainly like it. I hope you do too. Um, but I've been talking for, oh, and please do send me info. And if anybody has anything else they want to say, this is your last opportunity to please pipe in. I want to thank everybody for showing up. I hope that the microphone worked well. I hope you all have a wonderful night. And I hope that if you watch this, you enjoy it. And if you watch it at a later time, I hope you enjoy it as well. I am new at live streaming. I ask that you please critique, but please be kind. Remember, we are ghosts and ladies, all paranormal, never politics. And we do hope that you have a good night. Please continue to comment. We would love to continue the conversation. Thank you and have a good night.